There's a specific feeling, I bet you know. It's not exactly discomfort. It's not exactly excitement. It's something in between. It's the moment you realize that the way that friend looks at you isn't exactly the way he looks at anyone else. It's the moment you count the seconds his hand stayed on your shoulder and realize it was a lot of seconds. It's when you wake up at 2 in the morning to a text from him on your phone screen. A message that makes absolutely no sense to be sent to you and only you. And you just lie there staring at the ceiling trying to figure out if you're seeing what you think you're seeing, or if you're just making up what you want to see. That's the thing about friends who say they're straight but treat you different from everyone else. You can't tell if you're reading it right or making it up. Is it intuition or wishful thinking? When you don't know, you go quiet. You brush it off. You tell yourself you're overreacting, that you're seeing what you want to see, that a straight guy with a girlfriend wouldn't do this stuff on purpose. I did that for 4 months. Looking back now, I can see exactly what was happening. I can name every signal, recognize every pattern, understand why I couldn't name it at the time. But back then, when I was waking up every day going to work sitting next to this guy processing everything he did, it was way easier to doubt myself than to accept what was right there in front of me. My name is Gabriel. I'm 26. I work as a behavioral data analyst at a tech company in São Paulo, which is kind of ironic because I spend my days reading patterns in data, and somehow it took me 4 months to see a pattern right there in front of me every single day. The guy I'm talking about is Matheus Cavalcanti, a software developer at the same company. 28. Easy smile. Dark hair a bit wavy. The kind of voice that carries more than just words when he leans in close. The type who walks into a room and everyone just knows he's important without even thinking about it. This is how 4 months with him taught me to recognize something I'd never had a name for before. When I tell it, you'll recognize it. You might have lived this. You might be living it right now. You might know someone like this and not know what to do with it. I promise you that by the end you'll understand why you couldn't name it, and that naming it changes something. Come with me. Matheus joined 3 weeks after me. I remember it because HR asked me to help with his onboarding, show him around, meet the team, explain the systems, the kind of thing you do without thinking. My first take was that he was the type who owns a room naturally. It's something you either have or you don't. Not arrogant, just comfortable in his own skin in a way that made everyone around him shift without noticing. He'd walk in and you'd feel him arrive. He'd smile this smile that shut down the conversation before it started. Tall, impossible to ignore, dark hair messy, the guy you'd introduce to your dad without hesitation. Straightest guy I've ever seen, I thought that day, and didn't think about it again. The friendship moved fast. We had lunch at the same time, liked the same bands, hated the same corporate stuff. 2 weeks in, we were sending each other memes with no explanation needed. 3 weeks, and we're out for beers in Vila Madalena on Thursdays like we've always done this. In that natural rhythm of a new friendship, I wasn't looking past the surface. It felt good to have a friend like this, no effort. And that's exactly where the first sign slipped in without me noticing. Matheus touched. A lot. In situations where he didn't need to. In the hallway, passing by with a, "What's up?" He'd put his hand on my shoulder. Not a quick pat. His hand would land and stay there an extra beat. In team meetings, when I said something interesting, he'd nudge me with his elbow and give me this look like we were the only two who got what was happening. In the break room, mid-conversation, his hand would find my forearm and just stay. Not 2 seconds. Way longer than that. I told myself, he's like this with everyone, because I needed that to be true. It was simple, it was safe, and I held on to it hard. Except there's a problem with that answer. It wasn't true. I started watching him in a way that made me uncomfortable. Studying someone without them knowing you're looking. For 3 days, I ran my own experiment. I watched how he moved around other people, with our teammates, with people at lunch, with the receptionist he said hi to every morning. Here's what I saw. Matheus was an extrovert, yeah. He'd pat guys on the back walking past, shake hands firm and loose, laugh loud in a crowd. Easy, uninhibited, casual touch, just how he moved through the world. But the way he touched other people and the way he touched me were different things. With others, it was social touch, quick, functional, forgettable. With me, it was different. It was deliberate. It was touch meant to be felt, not incidental. It was the kind of touch you save for someone you know more than a couple months. One moment stuck with me. We're in a glass conference room with 4 other people talking about a platform redesign. Someone on screen shows a coding error, and Matthias, sitting right next to me, leans forward to see. His arm presses against mine for about 10 seconds. He doesn't move. He just keeps talking about the error, his forearm against mine the whole time, like it's nothing. After the meeting, I went back to my desk and stared at my own monitor for about 5 minutes without processing a single thing on the screen. But the moment that stuck with me most was at a bar in Villa Maddalena. We're sitting side by side on a bench and he's telling me this funny story about a trip he took last year. In the middle of it, he turns toward me, puts his hand on my knee, and leaves it there until he's done. Naturally, casually, like it's nothing. Like he's not even doing it. Or like he doesn't care what it looks like. I didn't sleep that night. Because when his hand landed on my knee, my body reacted without permission. A rush you recognize when you feel it. And once you do, you can't pretend you didn't. Lying in the dark of my Pinheiros apartment, the first thought hit me. What if this isn't just personality? What if it's intention? I brushed it off. Of course I did. Matthias had a girlfriend. He was straight. The straightest guy I knew. I dismissed it, went to sleep, and the next morning pretended nothing happened. What I didn't know was that this was just the beginning. That there were 7 more signs to come, each one harder to ignore than the last. Today, I know what was happening that night in Villa Maddalena. The hand on my knee wasn't an accident. Back then, I still had enough energy to convince myself that it was. About 6 weeks in, I did what I thought was a mistake. Now I know it wasn't. It was when the second sign became impossible to ignore. At lunch on some random Tuesday, I mentioned I'd gone out for dinner Saturday with a guy from my soccer team. Nothing romantic. Just 2 friends at a neighborhood place talking about the game, home before midnight. But I mentioned his name, said we talked late, and moved on without making it weird. Matthias got quiet. Not the silence of someone thinking. The silence of someone processing something unexpected. He switched topics fast, different for the rest of lunch, less present, that easy smile tighter, answers shorter. That night, the text came in. Short, dry. So, did you enjoy the dinner? And when I replied, it was chill, the guy is cool. His response took 40 minutes to arrive, and it was a single word. Nice. I didn't push for an explanation, but I kept watching. The pattern started showing up over and over. Every time I mentioned hanging with another guy, not romantic, sometimes co-workers, sometimes old friends, Matthias would shift, go quiet, turn cold, or ask something casual that revealed he'd been thinking about it. That friend of yours, what's he do again? Questions that seemed innocent, but kept coming back in a way that wasn't innocent. The second time was worse. I mentioned going to a movie with Henrique, a college friend. Years of friendship, nothing else. Just a guy you grow up with who sticks around. But I said we might grab drinks after. The next Monday, Matthias was in a mood that didn't match his weekend. Closed off, quiet, short answers. At lunch, he asked something pointless. This Henrique guy, does he live near you? I said yeah, same neighborhood since college. He did an "oh, got it" that didn't get it at all. Changed the subject. I watched and stayed quiet. The third incident took away my ability to keep brushing things off with the same conviction. I went for a run at Ibirapuera Park Saturday and ran into Rafael, someone from an app who became a friend. We talked for 40 minutes by the lake. Monday, I mentioned running into a friend without explaining where from. Matthias asked who. I told him. He asked how we met. I was vague. Friend of a friend. He went quiet, then said, casual, but not really. You hang out with a lot of different guys. Then he brings up Camilla. He talks about plans they have for the weekend. Not natural. More like he's grabbing something to hold on to. Like he's telling himself more than me that he has a girlfriend. That there's a shape, a role, a place where he shouldn't feel this. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't just brush it off. I didn't use the word. The word was jealousy. But I wasn't ready because it meant everything between us would change. and I didn't know if I wanted that. And what happened in the following weeks left me no room to not know. The late-night texts didn't start overnight. They came gradually, in a pattern I only saw looking back. First a meme at 11. Then a show question at midnight while he's watching. Then work stuff at 11:30 with no reason to text. Each one alone was fine. Together they weren't. Then the messages got heavier. Can you work somewhere you like, but not know if it's going anywhere? 11:47 p.m. Tuesday. I read it 3 times because it wasn't a casual question. Sometimes I feel like I'm living a life someone else designed. 12:23 a.m. Thursday. The Mateus at the office, confident, commanding, wasn't the one sending these texts at night. Are you awake? 1:47 a.m. No follow-up, just that. Like he needed to know if I was there, available, on the other side of the screen. I said yes, and he sent hey, and went quiet for 20 minutes before talking. When he did, it was about a career decision he'd been avoiding. About being on a path someone else designed that he just followed without thinking, and now it felt too late to go back. But it's not too late, I wrote. He took a while replying. That's the first time someone told me that, and I believed them. 2:34 a.m. I was always there. What made me finally see what was happening was Andre. Andre's been my friend since college. Graphic designer, 27, gay, zero filter about what he sees. We had lunch Friday, and I ended up mentioning Mateus's messages just to share, not analyze. Andre paused with his fork in the air. He texts you at 2 in the morning. Sometimes. This kind of message, introspective, heavy, existential. Yeah. He looked at me for 2 seconds. Does he send this kind of stuff to anyone else? That question brought everything to a halt. I didn't know, but there was a way to find out. Over the next few days, in conversations with coworkers, I let Mateus's name come up and listened. The Mateus they knew was the extrovert, the guy with the easy smile. No one mentioned late texts. No one mentioned conversations like that. Those late-night texts were for me. Only for me. And it was exactly at that point that I started to see the 4th sign more clearly. Because someone who shares that kind of late-night intimacy with a specific person is also, in parallel, testing the waters to see if it's safe to go further. One night stuck with me. Wednesday around 11. Do you think we really change, or do we just learn to hide it better? I sat with that for a moment. It was too precise to be random, like he'd spent time thinking about it. I wrote back, both, maybe. But the distinction matters. That's how it opened up. 3 hours talking about growing up learning certain emotions were dangerous. About performing yourself for so long you don't know what's real anymore. Around 1 a.m. he wrote, sometimes I think the person people know is so well crafted I believe in it too. I stared at that for 2 minutes before replying. It was the most honest thing anyone had sent me in a long time. I didn't plan to stay up until 4 a.m. chatting about identity, choices, being seen in a way that's not quite you. But I did. Because when he wrote like that, I couldn't stop. There was something in those late-night conversations, no armor, no performance, that made it impossible to close the app and sleep. And the next day, he shows up at the office with his usual smile, says hi, like he says hi to everyone, asks about work, like that night never happened, like there's 2 Mateuses, the daytime one and the night one, and they don't know about each other. I learned not to mention them during the day. He didn't want me to bring them up. That unspoken rule said more than anything he'd actually said. But there was a 4th sign that I hadn't yet figured out how to read. And when I finally saw it, I couldn't pretend it was just talk anymore. Friday afternoon, 3 weeks into the heavy messages becoming normal. We're in the office kitchen waiting for coffee. A coworker makes a joke about a gay character from some Netflix show. The kind that's not mean but isn't funny either. Most people laugh or ignore it. Mateus doesn't. Then he looks at me and says something. He thinks it's interesting how the show handles that character. More complex than usual. He watched the first few episodes and the character's well written, well developed. I agreed. I watched it too, liked how it avoided the obvious stereotypes. The character felt real. And it was in that moment that I saw it. I saw it because I was looking at his face. Mateus's eyes weren't distracted. They were locked on something specific. Not the topic. Me. My reaction. What I felt talking about it. It was the attention of someone studying a response. The conversation moves on. Coffee's ready. We go back to our desks. But that moment stuck with me, made me look back. 2 weeks before, he brought up an article about same-sex marriage and asked what I thought about the media coverage. I answered without thinking. Now I'm reading that conversation different. It wasn't about the media. It was a test, finding out where I stood. 3 weeks before that, at a bar, he jokes about knowing how to recognize when someone likes you in a non-obvious way, and looks at me longer than a joke should. I just laughed and changed the subject. Now I see it. He was testing. The pattern was consistent. Mateus brings up gay topics casual, watches my response carefully, and when it ends, his whole posture shifts, more relaxed, closer, more like the night version of him than the office one. One thing I noticed later. He never did these tests in a group. Always one-on-one. Kitchen when everyone left, walking to the subway, back of an Uber we shared. Small spaces, no one watching, just for him. That meant something. It wasn't random, it was strategic. He was mapping out where I stood, checking if it was safe to take another step. I went to the bathroom after that coffee conversation. I looked at myself. This habit I'm developing of hiding after moments with Mateus I can't process. Cold water on my wrists, my face looking back. And for the first time, the idea that I'm making this up, projecting. It's all in my head. That idea got harder to believe. Because what I saw in his eyes wasn't someone just passing time. It was someone afraid of losing something. Mateus was looking for something. And he was looking in me. Mateus didn't keep his distance. Simple to say, hard to explain when you're in the friendship. Realizing the physical space between you isn't what it should be between two guys who've only known each other a couple months. At a restaurant with plenty of empty tables, he'd sit next to me, not across. In stand-up meetings with chairs available, he'd stand right beside me close enough to brush shoulders. In the coffee line, his presence behind me always felt heavy, impossible to ignore. I started noticing the distance he chose, the gap between what he needed and how close he stood. There was a pattern to it that wasn't random, even if it was hard to prove. One afternoon, we go to a bakery near the office for coffee. It's crowded, line of about 6, plenty of room. Mateus stands right behind me, close enough I feel his breath on my neck when he leans in to check the menu. Someone else joins and stands twice as far back. I notice immediately. Mateus stands like that for 8 minutes without discomfort, talking about the menu, laughing at juice prices, completely comfortable with how close he's standing. But there is one scene that perfectly encapsulates all of this with a precision I just couldn't ignore. The elevator. Late, around 7:30. Most people gone. I'm waiting when Mateus walks out of the dev area, slings his jacket over his shoulder, and stands right next to me without saying anything. The doors open and we step in. It's small, fits about 8 people. Just us two. We could stand in opposite corners like you do with a stranger. He stands right next to me. Not on the other side. Right next to me. Closer than necessary. Close enough I feel his body heat. The warmth you feel when someone takes up your space in a way that's intimate, not accidental. Neither of us said a word. 10 floors down in complete silence. Mateus staring at the numbers. Me staring at the numbers. Around the 6th floor, I realize I'm holding my breath. Not dramatic, just what your body does when you're in a space your nervous system knows is charged. Like walking into a room where something big just happened, and you can still feel it. Neither of us moves. Neither of us steps away. Doors open on the ground floor. We step out. He says, "See you tomorrow," with his usual smile, goes his way, I go mine. I go to the 1st floor bathroom, turn on the faucet, cold water on my wrists. I stand there 2 minutes staring at myself, trying to process what just happened in my chest during those 10 floors. Objectively, nothing happened, but my body didn't get that memo. It reacted to 10 floors next to Mateus like I'd just come through something massive. I go home that night and lay in the dark for hours before sleeping. The thought that won't stop spinning. Mateus knows. He knows exactly what he's doing with the space he takes up. The real question was whether he would ever let us put a name to it. That's when I finally did the math I'd been avoiding. and what I found pulled the rug out from under me. 4 months in, I did the math. Sat in my apartment Sunday afternoon and asked myself, how many times in the last 2 months did group outings end up just the two of us? The answer was almost every single time. There was a pattern I needed distance to see because I was in the middle of it. I was so deep that each time felt natural. We have great talks, just us two. Makes sense to stay longer. The others left early, just coincidence. But string them all together and look at once, the coincidence disappears, and all that's left is deliberate choice. Whenever there was a chance to include other people, Mateus found ways to keep them out. Not obvious. He never said, I want you alone. It was more subtle. Social engineering. Take a happy hour we were both invited to with co-workers. Mateus said he'd come but showed up late when everyone was leaving. We stayed alone another 2 hours. At the time, I thought it was just a coincidence. An outing I planned with Lucas. Mateus asks what I'm doing Saturday. I mention Lucas, and the day before he texts asking if I want to hit a different bar first. Just for a quick hour. That hour lasted all night. I never even called Lucas. But the thing that made me see clearly involved Rodrigo. A mutual friend texts saying he's in the area. Asks if he can stop by the bar where Mateus and I are. I read it, think it's great, about to say yes. Mateus reads over my shoulder. Close enough to see my screen, like always. Invading my space again. And says almost before I finish reading, man, we were leaving soon, right? We hadn't. We'd been there 40 minutes. I look at him. He keeps his casual smile like what he just said is nothing. No nervousness, just certainty. The certainty of someone who does this naturally without questioning it. I text Rodrigo we're leaving. Stay another 2 hours with Mateus without saying anything about it. I told Andre a week later. Tried to tell it just the facts, no analysis. Andre looks at me, then he says it, his unfiltered way. Gabriel, this guy's dating you without saying it. I want to reject it. I say Mateus has a girlfriend, he's straight, I'm exaggerating, Andre's projecting. Andre listens to all of it. When I'm done. Everything you just said. Exclusive plans. Jealousy when you mention other guys. Late night texts only for you. That elevator thing. It has a name. And it's not intense friendship. I go home alone that night. On the subway back, the city flashing past the dark window, I try to build a counter-argument. Try to find another explanation for everything Andre said. The exclusive plans. He likes smaller groups. The jealousy, he's protective of friendships. The late-night texts, we have trust that takes time. The elevator, coincidence, small space. Every argument falls apart before I can finish. Not because there's no explanation for each thing. There is. The problem is the whole picture. The sum of all these patterns over 4 months, always going the same direction. Always creating an exclusivity between us that doesn't exist with anyone else. Andre had a name for it. It wasn't friendship. Andre's words won't leave my head, not because I want them true, but because I can't build a solid argument that they're wrong. After Andre, I spend days avoiding the thought. I go to work, cross paths in the hallway, exchange what's ups, watch him wear his extroversion, that armor protecting him from naming anything. And I keep thinking, he knows that I know. He doesn't know that I know he knows. Or maybe he does and is waiting for me to do something. This stacked awareness is exhausting. Sunday night around 9 the text comes, "Are you home? Can I drop by for a few?" I am. I say yes. Mateus shows up with 2 beers. He comes up, we go to my balcony, and for 20 minutes it's the usual stuff. Work, a show he's watching, news that doesn't matter. Then in a silence between topics, he leans on the railing and stares at the street for a while. I don't say anything. I learned over those months that when the night version shows up during the day, don't push it. Just be there. Then he starts talking about his dad, not the facts, not what his dad said or did. What it was like being that guy's son. His father was an engineer, successful, the type who fills a room just by being there. Mateus always knew since he was little, there was a version of a son this man needed. Not that his dad said it, he didn't. But there was nonverbal language, a grammar of approval and distance, that Mateus learned to read perfectly before he was even a teenager. Certain achievements brought them closer. Vulnerability brought silence. Mateus learned early that it was safer to be the son his father wanted than to try to be anything else. The problem, he said, still looking out at the street, is that when you do this for long enough, you forget where the character ends and where you begin. He pauses, looks at the headlights. There are things I do, ways I act, that I don't know if they're mine or if I learned I needed to be them. I look at my life and I can't tell what I chose from what just happened without me deciding. The balcony is quiet. São Paulo at night has its own sound, that constant murmur of a city that never stops. I'm sitting next to this guy I've seen be the most confident, the most at ease, the guy who takes up space effortlessly, and he's telling me he feels like a stranger in his own life. I ask, careful, "Do you talk about this with anyone else?" He hesitates, gives a small laugh, no humor in it. No. No one else. More silence. Then Mateus turns his face away, stares into the dark avenue, and I see, not crying, what comes before. Pressure in his eyes, tightness in his jaw. Someone holding back something they're not used to letting out. He says quiet, "You know you're the only person I can talk to like this?" I don't know what to do with that moment. I know what I feel. I know what Andre would say to do. But I stay quiet, let it be. And after a while he pulls himself together, takes a sip of beer, looks forward again like someone deciding that's enough for today. But before moving on, he says once more, looking at the street, not at me, "I've never told anyone any of this. I believe him. Not because he said it. Because I know him well enough to know it's true. I know the office Mateus, outgoing, confident, walks in and disarms everyone. I know the work WhatsApp Mateus, funny, competent. I know the night Mateus who types long questions from his bedroom. The day version and the night version. I've lived with both for 4 months. What he's giving me on the balcony is a third layer. Not the performance, not the introspective messages. The Mateus who cries. The Mateus who's afraid. The office Mateus doesn't have this conversation with anyone. The Mateus that Camilla sees, I don't know but I'd guess, doesn't have access to this. I'm the only one. And when you're the only one with access to that place, you have to ask yourself what it means. Not about how he feels about me, but about what he gave me that night. What it means for a guy who built his entire life around performance to find the one person he doesn't have to perform for. It's not a normal friendship. I know it when I leave to get water. I know it closing the door after he leaves. I know it sitting on the couch with the 2 empty bottles on the table. I think about that for a while. What it means to be someone's only emotional outlet. There's responsibility in that beyond what friendship asks. And there's power too, which I recognize with discomfort. Mateus gave me exclusive access to a place inside him. That created an imbalance. He knew I was gay. He didn't know how I felt about him. But he knew I saw him in a way that made him safe. And he used that safety. Not manipulative. Not in bad faith. But he was. What I didn't know was what I'd do with what I knew. It happens on a Thursday. End of the month, the team just delivered a big project, goes out to celebrate. Starts with 8 at a bar downtown. Through the night it breaks up naturally. People leaving for kids, early meetings. We're down to 3, then 2. Mateus looks at me. Stay a little longer? We go to a smaller, quieter bar 2 blocks over. Table outside on the sidewalk. Perfect São Paulo night temperature. We order beers. In the first few minutes I notice something's different. Not the social Mateus, the one who disarms the room, makes the right joke, smiles at everyone. It's the night Mateus. Quieter, more present without the performance, deeper but not closed off. Just real. We talk about work, the project, what's next. He mentions sleeping badly the last few days. Deadline stress, he says. I tell him I get it. There's a moment when he laughs at something I say. With that laugh I've learned to tell apart. The group laugh, loose and performative, and the laugh he has with me, lower, real, like it comes from somewhere he doesn't let out in public. Tonight it's the second laugh from the start. The conversation gradually gets slower, deeper, that rhythm that happens when the space is right and the beer loosens the armor. In a silence between topics, Mateus looks at the table. Then, without looking at me, sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if you hadn't been at the company when I started. I don't say anything immediately. 3 seconds of silence. The kind after a sentence both of us know went too far to ignore. Mateus looks up briefly like he's checking if he said too much, then keeps going, forced casual. Like, not in a dramatic way. But you became fixed for me really quick. I don't think you know how much. I do. I let that land. Let it hang between us for 5 seconds. And then, for the first time in 4 months, I don't let it pass. Not because I'm drunk. I'm not. Not more than him. Not because I planned to say anything. Because it reached a point where letting it slide cost more than speaking up. I think about Andre. The balcony, Mateus saying, "I've never told this to anyone," in that low voice, jaw tight. 10 floors in the elevator in silence. The late messages only for me. Hands that lingered too long. Exclusive plans he orchestrated naturally revealing how much he needed them. I think, if I let this slide too, if I take "you've become an anchor for me" and swallow it and change the subject like always, what am I doing? Being kind to him? Or being a coward to myself? So I put the bottle down. Not because I plan to. Not because I know what's next. But because everything, Andre's words, all those late nights, the elevator, the balcony, was asking me to do something I've been avoiding 4 months. Ask a question. I put it down. I look at him. Mateus, I need to ask you something. And you don't need to answer right now. You can take all the time you need. But I need to ask. He looks at me. There's something in his expression I haven't seen before. Not the usual confidence, not the easy smile. Something more exposed than that. The face of someone who knows what comes next changes things. I said, "What do you want from me?" The silence that follows is different from all the others these months. Not someone avoiding something. The silence of being found, of being truly seen, maybe for the first time directly, and not knowing what to do with it. Mateus looks at me for a while, then away at the wet asphalt, then back at me. And he says, slow, choosing words carefully in a way that's not usual. "I think you already know what I want." It's not a confession, not "I like you," or "I'm gay," or anything that resolves it clean, but not a denial either. The answer of someone who's been found and doesn't have the energy to pretend he hasn't. I said, "Then why is it so complicated?" Mateus looks at the table, silent for an unmeasurable time. Then he speaks in that voice I only know from late-night conversations. "Because I don't know what to do with what I feel. Not yet. I'm not in a place where I can do what I'd need to do to answer that for real." We sit for a while without saying much. Not avoidance or discomfort. The silence of 2 guys who just spoke out loud, something that existed between them long before we had words for it. Honest silence. At some point, Mateus looks at the street, more to himself. I've never had this conversation with anyone. Not about the question, about the whole night. Standing on the sidewalk with warm beer and São Paulo traffic behind us, talking about things without a name yet but we both knew existed. I said, "I know." And he looks at me in a way I recognize. The same way during our late-night conversations, when the performative Mateus disappears and only what's underneath stays. That look that says, "You're the only person I don't have to pretend everything's fine with." When we get up to leave, on the sidewalk before calling cabs, he hugs me. Not the casual "see you tomorrow" hug, shoulder to shoulder, 2 seconds. A hug longer than necessary, hand on my back, chin on my shoulder for a moment before he pulls away. He keeps looking for a second after pulling away. Not his usual light, untouchable expression. A look I don't have full words for, but I recognize. The look of someone who took a step and doesn't know if he can go back. Not regret. Awareness. "See you tomorrow," he said. "See you tomorrow," I said. And then he left. The cab turned the corner and disappeared. I stay on the sidewalk for a few minutes. The street keeps moving around me. São Paulo doesn't stop for anyone. And I stand there with the city's sound, trying to name what I feel. Not euphoria. Not sadness, or the relief of a clean ending. Something quieter. 4 months of confusion, questioning myself, holding back what I saw. It wasn't resolved in a neat answer, but in a truth. Fragile truth, not fully shaped yet, but real. We both looked at it at the same time for the first time. Neither of us knew what we were going to do with it, but neither of us pretended it wasn't there anymore. I won't tell you what happened after that night. Not because there's nothing to tell, but this story's not about what happened between me and him. It never was. It's about learning to recognize what's right there when everything's telling you not to see it. When even you're telling yourself not to, because seeing it costs something. So here's what I think you came for. The 8 signs named, so you don't do what I did 4 months. Question yourself instead of trusting what you see. The first sign, touch that repeats until it's not casual. Not the quick social touch he uses with everyone. Touch that lingers a beat longer. Happens when it's not needed. Different quality than what he reserves for others. When you notice the difference between how he touches you and everyone else, you're already seeing it. The second sign, disproportionate jealousy. Any mention of another guy you're with triggers a shift. He gets quiet, distant, asks casual questions revealing he's been thinking about it long after. If he has a girlfriend, she might come up right after. But it sounds more like an anchor than affection. The third sign, messages only for you. Not surface stuff or functional texts, deep, introspective, existential. When you find out no one else gets this kind of thing from him, this late-night intimacy just for you, that sign carries weight. The fourth sign, the test. He brings up gay topics casual and studies your reaction with intensity that doesn't match small talk. He's mapping where you stand, checking if it's safe. When you look in his eyes those moments, and you know you're seeing something that shouldn't be there in casual chat about a show, trust it. The fifth sign, invading physical space. He doesn't keep conventional distance, sits next to you when he could sit across. Stands close enough you brush against each other unnecessarily. He occupies your space consistently, regularly, not random. His body finds reasons to be close. The sixth sign, exclusive plans. He engineers situations for you two alone. When there's a chance to include others, he finds ways not to. Shows up late, suggests a detour, says, "We were heading out," when you weren't. He wants you alone. That desire shows up in choices he makes before you realize they're choices. The seventh sign, exclusive vulnerability. He tells you things he doesn't tell anyone. Real emotions, insecurities he hides from everyone, thoughts that keep him up. You're the only one with access to that place. And that's not accidental. It's his way of saying something he can't say any other way. The eighth sign, the moment the facade cracks. Could be a remark that goes too far, a hug that lasts too long, a silence that says more than words. The moment he's truly found, and instead of running, he stays. Now I ask you, do you recognize anyone? A supposedly straight friend who does some of these things, or several, and you've brushed off because it's easier to dismiss the name, touches you different than others, gets quiet when you mention another guy, texts you at 2 a.m. with things no one else hears, steps into your space for no real reason, tests the waters with focus that's not random, engineers situations to be alone with you so naturally it shows how much he needs it, gives you vulnerabilities he doesn't give anyone else. You've already seen it. The issue was never your perception. It was what to do with it. I'm not saying you need to do anything. Not saying you should confront him, label it, or that it needs a clean ending. Real life rarely does. Mateus and I walked out without a conclusion, left with a half-spoken truth we both knew existed, but didn't know what to do with. And that was already different from pretending it wasn't there. Acknowledging it doesn't force action. Sometimes recognizing it and choosing not to act, for now or forever, is the right call for that situation. Real life is messy. People carry things that take time, like Mateus did, like everyone does. But recognizing it, that first step, the moment of no longer doubting yourself and admitting you're seeing what you're seeing, that's different from pretending you're blind. It's the difference between being honest with yourself and erasing what's right there. You don't deserve to unsee what's right there. You deserve to trust what you see. And if you're living this now, if you have a friend doing these things and don't know what to do with what you know, tell me in comments, Which of the 8 signs did you recognize? Because what became clear is that most of us go through this alone, thinking it only happens to us. And it doesn't just happen to us. You already know more than you think you do. What you decide to do with that is entirely up to you.